So, if credit cards and debit cards create their own societal problems due to high transaction fees, then perhaps other technologies are the solution. And if you've been to China in the past year or so, which I hope you haven't, you probably agree that technology might be the solution. That's because in China, making payments digitally has become a cultural norm. QR codes are literally everywhere, and that's largely due to China's ever-ubiquitous smartphone apps, WeChat and Alipay, which dominate the payment industry on a scale that is truly unprecedented. To put it in perspective, credit card payments in the US totaled $4.1 trillion in 2019, whereas in China, mobile payments totaled a mind-boggling $41 trillion US, or more than 10 times that of the US. To give you a real-world example of just how widespread mobile payments are in China, street performers and even homeless beggars accept WeChat Pay. Now obviously, China has a larger population than the US, which naturally leads to more transactions, but even still, this should not detract from the scale of this massive digital economic ecosystem. Magnitude aside, these platforms break down many of the barriers that would ordinarily hold back a cashless economy. For starters, transaction fees are for the most part non-existent, and setting up infrastructure for accepting payments doesn't require going through the hoops and hurdles of setting up bulky payment terminals. Instead, it simply means downloading an app. To go back to our previous example of running a small bakery, we saw that all the payment merchant fees were effectively 9% of a sale of a purchase price of a $5 cup of coffee. If our hypothetical bakery was located in Beijing and we were using WeChat, the merchant fee would instead be $0, adding that 8.9% back to the business, all while being a lot easier to set up and get going. Of course, the next question is, how do mobile payment companies like WeChat Pay without any merchant fee income actually generate money to fund this service? And that is where things can get a little bit dicey. The first strategy is the most benign, and that is by tying WeChat Pay into the entire Tencent ecosystem, it makes it really easy for consumers to make payments on other Tencent-owned properties like games such as Fortnite or Clash of Clans, media, music, streaming services, or anything else that Tencent owns, which is basically everything. But of course, it's not a secret that the Chinese Communist Party maintains strict controls over data collection and usage, even in a company like Tencent, which is supposedly non-state owned. In China, if foregoing merchant fee income is the cost of acquiring vast amounts of individualized data pertaining to how their people are spending all of their newfound wealth, then that's a cost that they are more than willing to pay. Of course, this may sound scary, and that's because the Chinese government is scary. But it all highlights perhaps the biggest problem with a cashless society. It gives too much power to the providers. WeChat Pay is unlikely to ever take off in the Western world, and that's because most nations have a perfectly justified suspicion of giving too much information to companies located in China. Just look at the recent drama with TikTok. But a cashless economy, regardless of which government oversees such a society, would ultimately be at the mercy of payment providers. Money is designed to dictate what is produced in society by letting people vote with their wallets for products and services that they want more of or don't want more of. Cash, as in one of those paper rectangles, are one of the only truly anonymous ways of casting this transactional vote. Everything else, be it a credit card, a wire transfer, a buy now pay later app, or even WeChat, is handled by a private institution with a profit motive. Now, some of these private companies are better than others, but they do ultimately have the same power to sway the outcome of these transactional elections. What's more, is that these payment overlords have the ability to completely deny service to any business or individual they choose. For example, let's say that credit card providers decide to no longer support the NRA and choose to stop processing donations to this institution. As private companies, they are fully within their right to do this, but in a world where cash is a thing of the past, this would mean that such an organisation would have no alternative way of receiving revenue, essentially putting the NRA out of business. Now, no matter what your opinion is about the NRA, and everyone has one, it should not be up to MasterCard to make this call. What's more, is that money in the system is at the mercy of the system. At the beginning of this video, we mentioned that the Australian government has announced plans to make it illegal for businesses to accept more than $10,000 in cash. The primary reason for this was that it would limit money laundering and other naughty activities, which in fairness is actually a valid point for having a cashless economy. The problem is that a lot of people are seeing this as the first step to a widespread limitation on the use of cash. Now, pretty much nobody in Australia is paying $10,000 in cash for anything, but that's actually beyond the point. It's more so about the freedom to be able to do it if you so please. If, for example, negative interest rates were widely adopted in response to, the largest economic decline in recorded history, then it might actually cost people money to keep cash in a bank account, making a mattress the more fiscally conservative depository institution. If there were legal limitations on cash, then people might just have to suck it up and pay for the privilege of having money. What's more is that long term, this might not even be a win for the government, and if such a large change was to happen, then it is going to be driven by those who have their finger on the printer. A cashless society would devastate the black market, as well as the whole shadow economy that we've already explored more in depth on a recent video. This would obviously be a win for the government, but not necessarily for the reasons that you would expect. Firstly, going cashless may help slow down serious criminal activities, but it will also stop more benign crimes. Things like cash in hand work on the weekends, or even paying people under the table would all be virtually impossible, helping to increase government tax revenue, easing the burden on those who actually do pay their taxes fairly. As for the more serious stuff though, when there is a will, there is a way, and if people want to trade illicitly or get paid under the table, they will find alternatives like cryptocurrencies or even gold. The robustness of the underground market aside, this would also mean giving up seigniorage, which is a fancy word for describing the profit that a government makes by printing money. A standard $100 US banknote costs about 20 cents to produce according to the US Federal Reserve Bank. That means every time the money printer goes brrr and a physical note is printed, the government is profiting $99.8. In 2018, the US government profited $80 billion just by printing physical cash, which on the scale of the US budget is admittedly pretty insignificant, but nonetheless, why would you give it up if there's no benefit to do so? Which, as we've seen so far, there may or may not be. The march towards a future where paper cash has become extinct is something that has people genuinely concerned for valid reasons. We have gone from a society that trades in gold, to trading in notes backed by gold, to trading in notes backed by nothing, to trading in digits backed by notes backed by nothing. There were concerns and drawbacks to every step of this process, but it is possible that the ease and convenience of a purely digital financial landscape will outweigh the burdens. For now at least, it seems like the great economist Biggie Smalls was wrong, and more money, less problems is the status quo. Even if going completely cashless is only a hypothetical for now, it's still important for a society to consider these valid concerns. Not only because it may be more than a hypothetical in the not too distant future, but because it reveals a lot about the financial mechanics of the world that we live in.